Hello, dear listener, and welcome to another edition of 10 Laws with East Forest. Super glad to be back and releasing the 6th episode after released those first chunks. So I hope you're enjoying it. Getting some pretty nice feedback out there. An interesting thing about the stats is like the meditation that we put out there seems to be downloaded almost twice as much as everything else. So it's like, maybe that's something you guys want more of. If it is, let me know. info@eastforest.org. That's where you can send your questions and comments. That's also the PayPal address if you want to support this podcast and send us some money. But please also review it on iTunes, Stitcher, and sharing it on social media and with your loved ones. And anyone you think that might benefit from this podcast would be a great way to support it in its critical first few weeks so we can just get these things off the ground. I did get a note from Sam out in Florida. He says, I'm really liking the new podcast. The line where you said, I was thinking of doing a podcast of an interview with other people with names Trevor Oswald and what it's like to be Trevor from all the Trevors I can find and interview them. But then I didn't because that would be stupid. It made me about fall off the bench laughing. It's also good to catch up with Lorenzo on there too and see how our lives towards personal exploration connected in so many ways through similar spokes. Keep it up, brother. And it's got one of those little emojis with a, I believe it's a tear coming out of his eyes, and I'm gonna think that's a tear of joy. But anyway, send us your questions or comments if you do have them, info@eastforest.org. I did want to let you know about a new event I have coming up. It's in New York City, and it just got announced. It's going to be July 18th. I haven't played there in quite a while, and I used to live there, so I do have a lot of old friends. So I hope to see some familiar faces. But it will be on July 18th at Rockwood Music Hall. I think it's stage 2. But we are selling advance tickets, and you can get those through their site, or you can just go to eastforest.org/tour, and you should see that on there. I also announced this last week, I believe, a new venture concert series that I will be doing around the country, and that's called East Forest Ceremony. And what is this? Well, East Forest Ceremony is like an idea that I've had to combine concert with ritual. Like I've always felt that doing something up on the stage and performing, it's awesome, it's fun, but we're missing these elements of ceremony and ritual. That is really what the roots of my work is, and how this whole sound developed was from the ceremonial realm. So I've always wanted to combine the two, and so I finally was like, let's just do it. So we're going to do these events that have some elements of ritual. Imagine that we're in the round. I'm out in the center of the room. There's some beautiful lighting. You can lie down on the floor. There's scents. There's sounds. There's classic East Forest songs, but also some really deep ambient cuts, really heart-centered, filled sound meditation cuts. You can really dive deep. And this is all this one big connected journey of different instruments and I'm just looking for a way for you to really dive in deeper. I'm looking for a way to have a much more powerful experience live and to use this music as a technology. So East Forest Ceremony is a venture at doing that. And the first one is coming up on May 27th in California in Santa Cruz at 1440 Multiversity. And they're doing a whole discovery weekend, which I'm actually going to be playing music for. And you can come to that, which is a deeper sort of retreat weekend that I'm a part of. But you can also just come to the concert on, I believe the 27th. I think that's a Sunday. I believe it's a Sunday or Saturday, whatever. May 27th, Santa Cruz, 1440 Multiversity. You can go to my site or theirs and check out the tickets. I believe they even have a deal where you can have dinner as part of your tickets. You can come there, have dinner, and then come to this ceremony event. We're pretty psyched about it. But otherwise, I was up in Boise, Idaho this last week, came back down here to southern Utah, to the Boulder town, and I've been here just for a few days and did some hiking, getting back in the groove. Things are getting warm. I can definitely feel the change of season. Been doing a lot of writing and music on a project I look forward to telling you hopefully about more soon. But until then, until then, I'm excited about my next guest. It's my old friend, MC Yogi. And MC Yogi is someone that I've known him for many years, but I had the joy of getting to know him pretty deeply when we collaborated on a record together called Ritual Mystical. His release, and it was in 2016 in August. And it's a pretty groovy thing. The guy, he likes vibey music, and he's always saying, yeah, I think we can make it vibier. Let's make it vibier. And I think that's something I bring up as a good memory. But he's an interesting guy, and he's really created a singular sect for himself in the world with this unique beast that is MC Yogi, that combines all the things that he's into, which is sort of like cartoons and yoga and hip-hop and music and having a good time and group cohesion. And he's also got a new book out, Spiritual Graffiti. So we're going to get into stuff like that. And I think you're going to notice about 15 minutes through the fidelity of my mic is a lot better. And that's because I forgot to record the first 15 minutes of me. But thank God I'm an Eagle Scout and I had a backup mic. So you're going to hear my backup mic for the first 15 minutes. And then suddenly it's like a blanket comes off and the fidelity soars. That's a total music nerd nonsense. It's like, whatever, dude. Anyway, that's what's up. You're going to hear that. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoy this conversation. I'll see you on the end. This is MC Yogi. So, you're at a new house, man. How are you?
I am well, man. I am happy. We just got back from Sri Lanka, and it is so good to be home. It was such an epic, long journey, but amazing adventure.
I don't know if I could point to Sri Lanka on a map. I mean, where is that exactly?
So Sri Lanka is sort of like it's like a teardrop just below the tip of India. And it's sort of like a jewel.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's a beautiful island. I think it's like 80% Buddhist. And I'd spent a lot of time in India traveling and journeying to a lot of amazing places, but I'd never been to Sri Lanka, and it's very different than India.
What's different about it?
Well, because it's a Buddhist country, to me, my experience was it's much more mellow. And
so the Buddhists are more mellow than the Hindus?
Well, just a little more reserved, a little more introspective, and it was cool, man. It was super beautiful people, amazing food, tropical palm trees, coconuts, beautiful beaches, and beautiful temples.
Nice. Is that a retreat?
That's a retreat. Yeah, that was the first time we'd ever done that retreat in Sri Lanka, and I think we're going back next year because we had just such an amazing experience. We're like, man, we got to do this again.
That's badass. Nice.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
So I know like we were kind of chit-chatting about music and stuff, and it was just getting me thinking about Ritual Mystical. And I think I was in my car the other day and things were on shuffle, and like I think it was Breathe Deep or something came up. And I haven't listened to it in a little bit. I haven't heard some of those tracks. And I was just thinking back on our process and like how that whole thing came down. And like the more I thought about it, it was sort of a unique like way that whole thing fell into place. And I was talking to Tim about it. And the thing that was kind of maybe the biggest blessing in disguise, I was thinking about like creative process and stuff, was that we had that really hard deadline.
Yeah.
Which made it sort of horrible, but it also made it like, it probably actually made it what it was in a way. You know what I mean?
Well, pressure makes diamonds, and that album is filled with a lot of jewels and a lot of gems. And to be honest, I play those songs in every single yoga class that I teach. I play at least one track from that album. And you did such a beautiful job, man. There's so many beautiful textures and just such a deep energy, and it just lends itself to an amazing yoga experience. So yeah, I think that deadline almost killed us, but
It's 3 months, if I remember correctly. When we actually started working to when it needed to be done was 3 months, with like starting from the beginning.
yeah, I think that's the fastest record that I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, I know. Like I guess people might not understand like the process of creating a record, but it's like the writing part it's just one part, right? Because then it's like you have to spend all that time then making it into mixing it and songs, and then you have to spend all that time mastering it, and it's a lot of steps.
A
So
lot
3
of
months is
layers.
definitely pretty tight, yeah. So you use it
A
in
lot of
class?
layers.
Do you lip sync? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I lip sync all my classes, and in fact, if you go to the show, sometimes we'll have like a lip sync battle. So that's kind of
What's the creative process like for you normally? Because I know you're someone who has a lot of ideas all the
yeah,
time.
that is true.
And do you feel like you're someone like that needs to capture those, or you or are you someone that feels like you have to keep that in flow all the time, or it might trickle away, or is it just like an onslaught in your heart and your mind?
It's the way I experience it is like a universe, like it's always there, like these clusters of stars. It's infinite, like ideas, but there's always certain sort of planets or stars that shine a little brighter, and I keep coming back to ideas over and over again. There's like these reoccurring themes. And for me, my process is really an organization process, because there's so much content when it comes to like lyrics or concepts or ideas, thoughts, patterns, melodies, all that kind of stuff. My real work is creating these constellations, because oftentimes like making a song for me is like putting a puzzle together where I'll have certain ideas or words that I've said in my mind 6 years ago that just
Yeah,
never left, and
yeah,
just kind of get like lodged in that. How the brain has got a lot of folds, and there's just like little words that get like stuck in between the folds, and they just stay there. And then I'll hear a piece of music, and it'll just kind of loosen that up, and then it'll fall together with other sort of clusters of words that came from another experience or another place, and then they kind of form together. And it doesn't always make sense. It's not linear. I
no, I
wish
mean,
I were more
my
linear.
experience with you is that like it's a lot of ideas, and they're not even all. It's like you also do like you draw a lot. It's almost like you need an outlet continuously to keep that thing being expressed.
Yeah,
You
if it
know?
backs up, it's uncomfortable. It's like being pregnant for like a little too long. It's like it wants to come out. And so yeah, it's great to be in the stream of just putting stuff out. But I also am of the mind, and just more recently I've been really contemplating this, and I'm really experiencing the value of things taking time,
Sure.
and not always being in like a huge rush to sort of keep up with the world, but really like going deep and incubating and cultivating and sitting and being with the content and cooking it a little more. And so
Letting it
that's been my,
ferment.
yeah. And yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine who was a farmer yesterday, and he was like, when you're working with compost, you have to keep turning it and aerating it and circulating it, and there needs to be an aerobic energy, so nature can do its thing. And so for me, I've been really trying to spend time internally, just working with my material, turning it, looking at it, feeling it, reciting it, connecting with it, um, putting more content into it in the pile, but also like just listening and being like, okay, is this ready to go out yet? And oftentimes, no. It's like it needs time to ferment.
Yeah, but that's an interesting point, man, because it's like what I was talking about with that deadline when we were doing Ritual Mystical is that it forced us to not even we didn't have the time to really think about whether something was worthy or ready. We just
Yeah,
had to
and
like do it, and there seemed to be a certain,
that could be a good thing. Yeah.
there seemed to be a certain value, and our mind had to be like, just let it go, let it go, let it go. Keep creating content, keep creating content. Yeah, we trusted our gut for sure. And we were like, this feels better, this feels ready, but we couldn't be too precious about it. And I know for me, when I kind of have more time, I start to it can be a tricky,
Yeah.
because I can overthink things too, but I'm sure it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes it actually is making things better, right? I'm sure like there are things we could have done differently, or we could have made more material, but at the same time, it goes both ways.
Maybe even more than a double-edged sword, it's like a quadruple blade razor, like those new razors, where it's got like 7 different razors on it. So yeah, it can go. It can go either way. It can create a clean shave, or it can cut you. So I'm very much a
horrible goatee.
I saw an amazing mustache yesterday of a guy whose mustache was in the shape of the Batman symbol, and I thought that was an excellent choice.
Just his mustache?
Just his mustache and his little goatee.
That's pretty badass.
As a bat stash. Thought that was very creative.
Yeah, but go ahead.
But I was just going to say, like, if you were Bruce Wayne and you had the Batman mustache, you would almost give it away. Like, your secret identity would be kind of...
Yeah, it's a little on the nose.
Literally.
Well, you've also been, I remember when we met you, when we were working on that, you were doing a lot of touring. You're really busy. I'm sure you are still. And I mean, it's an interesting beast, like being a musician for a career these days in sort of the Wild West of music making, and, feeling like, piece of that pie to keep things sustainable is being out in the world, being on social media, creating new content. And then you wrote a book, you have to diversify into other ways. 1, because you're interested in it, and 2, because it's just, you got to do that, right? To keep getting on. So, I mean, like, what challenges have come up for you in the past year or two as you've been really busy? And I hear you saying, I'm reflecting back that you're saying a bit about you're wanting a little bit more time and slowing down with things. So maybe that's a reflection of that, perhaps.
Yeah, I think being on the conveyor belt, going out, doing a lot of events. Like, I think we did like 30, 40 cities last year. And, just constantly being in the plane, airports, hotels. There's a real joy in that. And I really love connecting with the audience and meeting people and performing and sharing, my craft. And I absolutely love that. There's a thrill to that. And then there's also like a physical aspect where it really does take a toll on your, on your nervous system.
Yeah.
And sometimes, for me, there's like, I'm starting to understand there's seasons, there's times to go out and present, and then there's times to go back in and really cultivate and develop what it is that you want to share with the world, as opposed to just getting caught in this never-ending, insatiable sort of machine that just wants you to go out, give more. And what tends to happen this is just my limited perspective, but it creates a culture with a lot of superficial content where people aren't really doing the work necessary to like mine their life and bring forth something that's really going to benefit society or be,
Yeah. Well, it's like there's an older model, right, of music. Like the old model was you had a record, you made a record for a year or whatever, and then you toured it for a year.
Yeah. I mean, Bruce Springsteen toured his album for, I think it was something like 10 or 20 years, one album.
What? Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it was Born to Run. Yeah, I'd heard something about that. But yeah, I mean, there's something about really working to make things that are a little more timeless. And that's really what I'm interested in doing, trying to find that balance where it doesn't become so precious that it gets frozen, but at the same time, it doesn't become so superficial that it gets thrown away.
Yeah, I've always personally been aiming to make things that are timeless. Not, I'm sure part of that's egoic, like you want things to live on, but part of that's also I want to like transcend certain fads in a way, because you want to feel like the thing you're offering out there, if you're trying to make it an agent of change, that it's beyond just the change of the moment. It's like that deeper level of inspiring yourself and others to, I don't know, certain, even musically, like, you know, there's certain fads, and it's, some people just go for the quick hit, the quick, it's like, oh, that's
Yeah.
these sounds are being used like right now, so I want to use them too, or this effect is being used. And I've always shunned that. Like intuitively, it just sort of rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, I can resonate with that. And then at the same time, I'm kind of I'm a weird creature where I really do truly love and enjoy pop culture.
Yeah.
And it's interesting though, because some of the fads and trends, like if you have a little understanding of history, you see kind of where they came from.
The
And
cycles, yeah.
yeah. And that's interesting to me, because nothing is really new. It's just being sort of refreshed and recycled. And yeah, sometimes it feels like as human beings, we have a short sort of lapse of memory when it comes to like culture, and remembering that all these rhythms and all these sounds, and they, you know, we're in the electronic age, and there's a lot of new tricks and techniques, and I don't know, it's interesting. It can go both ways.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, a lot of that too is like when you're working digitally, it's never ending too. And there's the pluses and minuses of that. But again, we come back to this idea of limits and like the value of limits.
Yeah, that having a putting limiters on something can be extremely helpful. It creates a structure. It creates a system in which you can sort of do your best work in. But if that I don't know, it's like being a parent. I imagine I don't have kids, but I imagine, like, you know, you want to create a structure for your kid, but if you put too much structure on them, they're going to just rebel and break out and do their own thing. So it's trying to find like a living, breathing structure that's flexible and fluid enough, but can hold space well enough so you can kind of live and breathe and grow inside of it and discover your sound and your voice, and
Well,
without
it's like
getting
if you
lost.
you often draw it with one pen in black and white. You know, I mean, wouldn't it be different if you had infinite pages in every color and you could do it in 3-dimensional form? And like it'd be fun, but it'd also be a very different practice. Like something about just taking a black pen and creating images is really soothing for you.
Yeah, it's just simple. It's
Right. Yeah, there's a dimensionality to it that's sort of very clear cut, and it's like, okay, great, you give me, that's what I have to play with. I'll just play with that, and it's, you know, it keeps you in a certain boundary condition. It's almost like the boundary condition we have of just consciousness itself. Like we're in this on off 1-0 sleep awake death birth. And inside that boundary condition, that's what we're given to work with. I mean, it's quite vast and large, but at the same time, we can sense that there's something infinite beyond that. Yet if we could sense that infiniteness at all times and had access to everything, it'd just be like, it's almost like too much to be creative in. And we're creative beings, all of us, like all humans, right? That's what makes us who we are. We can create. And perhaps, I don't know, I've always thought that the creative process is something that's the birthright of everyone. And it's a strange era that we pay other people to do it for us. Like we're like, you're a better singer than me, so I'll pay you and listen to you. Or, you know, you're a better painter, so I'm going to pay to look at your paintings or to buy your stuff. And it's wonderful to see mastery, but we've sort of taken that agency away from ourselves to just like sing, or to say, because everyone can sing, right?
yeah.
And it feels good, even if you think you're bad at it. And it's just, these are things that we've kind of lost in the modern age.
Singing together is really powerful. In fact, I think that's one of the most transcendent and ecstatic experiences in a live show, when everyone is singing together.
Yeah.
Because it's the sound of unity, right? It's like, it's what we're all striving and longing for, an experience of connection and love and feeling like we belong. And then when we blend our voices together, it's tangible. Like it's not mental. It's like it's a physical experience of like, we're all humming this sound. There was a great quote I saw yesterday, and my friend had posted up, and it was about the Tao, and it was to your point about how we're all creators. And it says the Tao is the great mother, empty yet inexhaustible. It gives birth to infinite worlds. It is always present within you. You can use it in any way you want. And I thought that was so amazing, because essentially we are all creating our world and our reality. Like, we are all working with the same substance, which is life. Some of us create really beautiful things. Some of us create really destructive things, but we're all working with the same stuff. And it's just kind of interesting. It's like it's empty and inexhaustible. Everyone has access to it. It stretches in all directions. It's inside us as well as around us. It's sort of what I imagine the Jedi, call the Force. And we all can play with it. We can sculpt with it. We can create words with it, poetry, songs, fashion, dance. We can be silent in it. We can share it with others by just being present. And it's just this all-encompassing power, this energy, this light, this creativity, this potential. There's a beautiful saying in the yoga tradition that, the tree exists in the seed. The entire ocean exists in a drop of water. The vast amount of stars in the entire universe is within you, is within us. And it's up to us what we want to do with that. We can create a hell realm, or we can create a heavenly realm. It just depends on our values and our priorities, I guess.
Well, I agree with you, but let me play devil's advocate for a second. So here's the criticism I would see being levied at us. It's like, okay, two white guys who have had a lot of good fortune and luck in their lives, and have, they grew up in ways that gave them a lot of benefits, and so the stuff that they have to work with is better than someone who perhaps didn't have the same advantages in their eyes, or grew up in a way where they didn't feel like they could just grab their bootstraps. But so they might have a criticism saying, look, it's not as simple as just working with the Tao and the empty space and the force of the universe to create your reality. Not that that's what you're saying. What would your response be to that? Do you need more information? Or am I not explaining this correctly?
No, I just listen. That's a valid perspective. I mean, there's infinite perspectives and vantage points about who carries more suffering, and I think it's kind of relative. And it's interesting, right? Like, every human being who exists on this planet will experience some form of sickness. Their body will corrupt and die, and everyone they know and love will ultimately get sick and die. And I think the ground floor of that is, regardless of how much financial resources you have, which in some cases, what I've witnessed, because I grew up in a middle class family, but I've also experienced people who are extremely wealthy being absolutely mentally just in so much pain and suffering, more than anyone else that I've seen. So it depends on the perspective, because having traveled a bit around the world and connected and having friends all over the earth and interacted and having conversations, I really do find that there is a common denominator that we all share, regardless of our class or station in life. And that is, from the Buddhist perspective, that we're all dealing with a difficult amount of pain and suffering and struggle. And there's different degrees of it. And you can be in the same family, growing up in the exact same house, and one brother or one sister will have so much more pain and suffering than another sibling. And so it's hard to kind of generalize and categorize in that broad stroke kind of way, because I can't really speak to that, because I can only speak to my experience.
Yeah, and the soul's journey is unique at the end of the day. And
yeah,
everything that you experience is very unique to your path. Your path is your path, and it's not to say like go fuck yourself. It's more like your path is unique. Like it's uniquely yours. And there's no way for me to even know if the consciousness that I experience is the same that you experience or anyone else experiences. I feel that it is, but I really don't know. And I couldn't even say, if this isn't, just all some vast matrix dream or whatnot. But I know that you can't buy your way out of consciousness, and you can't, you can distract yourself for a long time, but it always catches up with you. And that's where that suffering can be quite deep. And there's no escape from that other than that your felt experience of the moment, of what it means to be alive for you and to be engaged in this world on that unique path that you're in. And that's where the rubber really meets the road, because that really comes down to you. There's no other way around it.
Here's an interesting dichotomy. So I've spent time like in India with mystics who don't have many physical possessions at all, and who seemingly are in a state of just joy and service and love and an ecstatic mood of devotion. And then I've spent time with people who are, millionaires, and they're just completely like chained elephants and just miserable and critical and judgmental. And so it's on the surface, it doesn't make any sense, right? It's like, so to me, it points toward this, there's a teaching in the philosophy of yoga, and it comes from the Yoga Sutras, was written, several thousand years ago by this great poet saint named Patanjali. And he said the root of our human suffering, and he was like a psychologist essentially. He said the root of our human suffering comes from one thing in his view, or her view. It could have been a collection of people that got together and wrote this scripture, but we classified as Patanjali. Through the view of Patanjali, the root of all suffering is misidentification.
Misidentification.
So if you think you're white, if you think you're male, if you think you're female, you think you're Republican, you think you're Democrat, you think you're, this age, this class, this many followers, like all the things that we sort of grab onto as who we think we are. All of that stuff is the root of all human suffering. And so the second part of that is what happens when we misidentify. It hardens into a knot or a fist called the ahamkar, the ego. So we start to become more dense and thick in this illusion, and it creates this pattern of desires and aversions. So we start to move into our likes and dislikes. We move and chase our pleasures, the things that we like that kind of reaffirm who we think we are. And we run from the things we're afraid of, the things that sort of threaten who we think we are, the things that are painful. And then that ultimately hardens into the final, what's called a klesha, the final of affliction, which is fear. And so all of our fear and suffering stems from this misidentification of thinking we are something that we are not, which creates a knot. And that ultimately becomes fear of death, because we think that we are this personality. And so that the idea of this personality being destroyed completely shakes us to our core. And then we start acting in ways that are sort of against our own nature, because we're trying to protect something that's not real.
With fear of death, I've talked about that before on the podcast, and about how I think that everything we do is stemming from that, essentially, whether we see it or not. It's like the great truth that we can't, a lot of us are running from or reacting to or reverberating against. And it's the most powerful force in our life. And especially for our ego, having the knowledge of that, it's like, it's quite shattering, right? Because for the ego, it's the mind itself, it just can't grok it. And it wants to, like everything else, it wants to put it in a compartment and put it on the shelf and catalog it and be like, great, I understand that.
So now here's the recipe and the formula to complement those afflictions. Soak the mind and the consciousness in the energy and the power and the presence of love itself, loving kindness. So the formula to relieve yourself from a suffering is resolve all of those things back into their source. So resolve the mind back into the source, trace the senses back to their root, move back into that place that existed before the personality developed, before we started to learn symbolic language, before we started to adapt to our culture, our customs, our traditions, our rituals. Before we hardened into all those things, it becomes a spiritual practice, whether it's through meditation or concentration, being in nature, some sort of discipline to be able to draw all of that back down and boil it into its essence, and then be with that in that space. And it starts to relieve the tension and the pounds of pressure that build up from the misidentification. And it starts to free up our consciousness. It unravels the knots inside the chest. It releases all the birds from the cage. All the flowers start to pop, and everything can just be as it is without all the extra added sort of superimposed pressure of fear of death. And nature can do its thing. And we can sort of glide gracefully through the seasons of our life with this deeper awareness that I am something that is much deeper than the shell and the husk of this body. I am something much more profound, more loving, more wise, and more kind than the chatter of this thinking mind. Essentially, I am the universe, and I am peace itself. I am love. I am light. I am darkness. I am all these things. I am what the yogis call the Atman, the self, or what the Buddhists would call the shunyata, the emptiness, the void, which essentially is filled with bliss and delight because it's not bound or attached. And in that practice, which is really, this is the point of all yoga practice, all sadhana, is like to have that experience of setting yourself free. It's like catch and release. Catch yourself so you can free yourself. So that's why I'm so fascinated and interested in yoga, because it seems to me that I've only been practicing for about 20 years, which is really a drop in the bucket. But in my experiences, I found there is a method and a way to get out of our own suffering and to get into our own sort of our own bliss, as Joseph Campbell would say.
Mm-hmm. Well, where does the MC fit in? Because for me, like, I'm less of a yogi, and so I lean a bit more on perhaps nature and music, and music is a big part for you too. And I've always seen, music is so fundamental in the universe and our experience, and so ancient, in a way of working with our emotions and our consciousness and our physicality, and pushing us and helping us, guide us into these areas where we can work with a lot of these feelings, this loving and kindness that you're speaking of. What role does that play for you in the creation of your music and your creative process?
Well, when I set out, growing up, I didn't discover yoga till I was 17, and I had been living in a group home for at-risk youth for about 2.5 years, because I was a juvenile delinquent, getting into a lot of trouble with the law and getting kicked out of school and doing drugs and getting involved in, wrapped up in violence and stuff like that. So like yoga was really far from my reality, but I'd grown up, listening to hip hop and performing as an MC, and I was a graffiti artist, and, my friends would break dance, and, that was sort of our, my thing growing up with my friends and my crew. And when I discovered yoga at 17, thanks to my dad, my life went through like a 360-degree transformation, where instead of looking for security on the outside, I discovered a practice and a path where I could go back into my own interior space and connect to something that was deeper on a consistent basis through yoga and meditation. And it was, through the practice of devotion and developing connection to nature, like you're saying, and music. And so when I started to do those practices and traveled to India and studying with different teachers and course, I met and fell in love with my wife, Amanda, who's an amazing teacher as well. And she's also a graffiti artist. And we kind of went on this journey together of going to India. My music and art, everything started to change. It started to become less and less about me, my little self, and the themes started to become a little more universal. It started to become more about philosophy and mythology and the things I was realizing through my practices. My music became an outlet and a platform to share. It was like sort of like my journal in a way. And so the MC met the yogi when I was 17, and that's what propelled me on this path of becoming MC Yogi. And I talk a lot. I talk about it. I wrote a book you were mentioned earlier called Spiritual Graffiti. And it's been my teacher, Larry, used to always say that if you really devote yourself to a practice, to a discipline, you really give your life to it and commit to it, you will discover yourself to be much deeper and much greater than you ever imagined yourself to be. And where there were once walls, you will find doors. And that has been my experience, because I never in a million years would have imagined that I'd be collaborating with you, performing, in front of thousands of people, writing a book, interacting with all these incredible, luminaries and inspiring teachers. But it was really through the yoga that opened all those doors to me, because otherwise I was closed down to myself. I was numb. I was using drugs, to kind of numb my pain. I was dealing with a lot of internal torment, suffering, and struggle, and anxiety and depression. And it wasn't. Yeah, it was thick. I was like a hard coconut that needed to be cracked.
Where are you at? Where's your edge now with that? Like, where are things at with your music? What's the edge of that with you now? And I totally. Hold on a second. I'm just getting some kind of feedback from your microphone. Maybe can you hear me coming through your mic? Like an echo?
Yeah, I hear a little bit.
Maybe lean back.
Yeah.
Maybe that's better. Yeah, there we go. Anyway, I was asking what's your edge now, like with your music, and how it relates to like where you're all coming from in that past.
Completely honest with you, you just said it. My edge is I get too close to it and I need to lean back. I'm too much of a perfectionist,
Well, right. That's interesting. Let's take this back then. How does that relate to where you started with all this in your path? You're saying too close to something. What does that do? Does that bring too much self-awareness? Does that bring too much self-criticism? Or does that bring you too close to what?
It just tightens the fist so the blood can't flow. And I think that sometimes when you're too close to something is because you're afraid and you're trying to like protect some part of yourself that's fearful.
Yes.
And so it's like this armor. And nature is wise. Like we have armor, like the immune system is our armor, right? Like we have armor, we have helmets, swords, shields. We have those things for a reason, because we do need to survive in the wilderness.
Yes.
But when those things are used out of context and in the wrong places, it creates suffering and pain, because it's coming from that misidentification of I think I'm something that I am not. So now I'm protecting something that's not real. And I will literally go to war for that, which is like the history of humanity. Is we've literally massacred each other trying to protect something that's not real. Whether it's like a religion or a theology or a philosophy, when it gets to that place where we have to destroy others in order to protect what we think is ours, that is the end result of that. What Patanjali says, the root of suffering is you think you're something that you're not, and you're caught up.
Yeah. Do you think you own the creativity that comes through you?
I don't beat my own heart. Like I don't heal my own wounds. Like I don't blink my own eyes. This is all happening. So I really truly think that Mother Nature is doing everything, but we also live in a system of human beings where there's like a banking system and like a school system and so we have to also like adapt and be able to like maneuver and work inside these structures but they're not always, the structures aren't always like rooted in nature and truth. So oftentimes we have to shake up the structure and free it up and unclench that fist and let it circulate and be refreshed. Because as we're seeing with the government, with the banking system, like so many of our human institutions have become corrupt. And so it really is up to people within those systems to change them. But it's not easy. It's uncomfortable. It's like, because there's so much hardness in tradition.
Well, it starts from your own internal practice. There's no other place it can come from, is from the inside out.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So if you're saying in some ways your edge right now, I like this, is to lean back. Your edge at the moment is to lessen the tightening of the grip so the blood can flow. And
but
go ahead.
At the same time, and I'm sorry to interrupt. At the same time, we still have to hold it. Because if you don't hold it at all, it just kind of spills everywhere and it's nothing, yes. Right? So it's that balance. If you have to hold things lightly, this is what I'm learning. Like, I'm not a master at this in any way, shape, or form yet. Like, I'm in the process of understanding it. But if we hold it too tightly, it cuts it off. If we hold it too loosely, it falls apart. So what is that middle space of like engaging in the creative process, being involved in it, but also not stifling it,
Well, and I wonder sometimes it has to be like everything else in life, a back and forth, just like meditation. Because if we think we're going to get to this place where we're holding it perfectly, it's like, well, you're going to drop it and then you're going to go this way. And that's the dance that we're doing. And I think if you can accept that dance and have compassion with yourself in the same way, like when you're meditating, the compassion, be like, oh, there I am thinking, or, and you just let that go and come back, come back, in, out. That's it. And you know how it is. Like, you have days where like you're really flowing and days where it just feels like
hitting the wall.
You're pulling horse shit out of a pile. And
yeah.
And that is the process. I must imagine for everyone, every artist, every person.
Inhale, exhale. There was a great teaching that I received yesterday, and it was from this gardener, and it was about the practice of trust. There's certain things we can trust. Like we wake up in the morning, we trust that the sun is going to be shining. We trust that the wind is blowing, the tide is going to be moving, the heart, things are happening. It says when you set out on a creative project, essentially what you're doing is you're creating an intention, you're planting a seed of what it is you'd like to create. Now, it's never ever going to turn out exactly how you imagine, because nature's not like that. You plant a seed and you can't always dictate which direction the branches are going to go, right? But there'll be branches.
Yeah.
But the magic is that every day when you show up to do your work, whether it's working on a song or a book or a movie or a film, your job is to water that seed with your effort and your energy, your attention. What your job is not is to pull that seed out of the earth every day and look at it and ask, is this still growing? And I think sometimes that's what we do, is we keep pulling these seeds out of the earth to look at them because we're afraid, is this actually working?
Yeah.
And I think when we have the trust in nature that this is going to be an album, this is going to be a book, this is going to be a podcast, this is going to be whatever seed we created, it is going to happen. But we have to just tend to it, water it, maybe pull some of the weeds around it, and just trust when it's time, it's going to happen. And
you hit the nail on the head with how I've spoken about being, identifying with the fruits versus the labor. You need to let that tree grow, and then the fruits are what you can pick, not the tree before it grows. And you being the honor that you bring to it is your will, like your discipline to be like, I'll put in the time. What comes out of that is the muse, all these things. I'll hone my vessel and put and work on it in a consistent way, little bricks at a time, watering that garden. And that's a really beautiful way to think about the creative process. So, I mean, in that sense, what are you watering right now? You got back from Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
You're a world famous international yoga rock star. You have a book out.
Well, that's all misidentification. Right? That's all suffering.
It's true. It's true. You're right.
But what I'm watering right now is about, I don't know, say like 30 demos.
I'm gonna guess
Just
they're more like 100 in your
yeah,
mind.
it's probably like
Lots of
108.
beats and little melodies and
Exactly. Um, but no, just really, what you said really triggered something in me, and I really appreciate it because when you focus on the quality of your work and you release the fruit, the outcome, it really is the essence of what Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, which is focus on your work and take joy in your work and release the outcome and let the outcome become an offering to the universe. Because if you're just focused on how much money you're going to make or how many followers you're going to get or any of those things, it's just going to create suffering because once again, you're misidentifying with something that you are not.
yeah. And it's shitty art usually because it's pandering, right? You're trying to make what you think people want.
Superficial.
It has to come from that place. I think Beck had a great little comment I heard him say. It's like, look, you have to realize when you're going into the studio, you're just making noise.
Yeah,
you can't,
that's great.
If you have to start from like, I don't know what we're doing, but we're just making a lot of gobbledygook noise right now, and we'll deal with the song action. We'll make it awesome later. But right now, I got the freedom to just make crazy shit and throw things around and make it messy and tear things down and put a new thing in and just play. So that element of play. And
that's why they call it playing music. That's right.
It's hard. It's hard, like when you do it for a living, because there's that knowledge in the back of your mind about when something needs to be, you want it to be finished or what you want it to be or how you want to work with it. And at the end of the day, you sort of, on some level, need to let a part of that go, particularly at the very beginning of a creative process, because it's so fragile. It's like you said, like a little seed, and you just got to let that little seed take shape, and then you'll find out what kind of plant it is.
Yeah. And I experienced that because I'd never written a book before. When I wrote my book, I got some of the best advice I'd ever received. And that was, don't edit in the beginning. Like just spill everything out onto the page and create a huge messy lump of clay. And then you can shape it later, but just get your ideas down. And then, editing comes way later once you actually have something to edit.
I feel that way with music too. Like I like to create for a while, a few weeks, a month, 6 weeks, and then go back and look, because I can get into their different brains, it's a different process.
Well, I have to acknowledge and give you a lot of credit because you have something in you that I really wish I had as a creator, which is you have this two sides of you, which is really amazing because you're a brilliant composer. So you have that artistic side, connecting to spirit and nature and really channeling these amazing, gorgeous sounds. But then you also have this other side where you're also an incredible engineer and you can edit and well, that's pretty rare. Like I'm kind of just like the big messy guy. And I, have some fun and kick up some dust and like make some big noise. But, I don't necessarily have that same skill set of being able to like really engineer and.
It definitely is its own thing. And it's something that I picked up initially just because I had to. Like there was no one to help me and I just had to learn as I go. I think I've probably put through 20, 25 albums, not just with East Forest, and you just get better as you do it. And even now, like I'm super humbled because they call it engineering for a reason. Like it's a deep, deep thing. And there's so much more for me to learn, but I'm also very focused on the sonic, like the sound itself. And I want a very particular, it's not just like, hey, I want a piano. It's like, I want a piano that sounds this way.
Yeah.
That to me evokes a certain feeling, and I'm chasing the feeling more than I'm trying to just like have the piano sound or whatever that sound. Like you were all about that. You maybe just didn't know what knob to turn, but you were all about vibe, right? Like you were all about that. You kept saying it over and over and over again. Like either we had the vibe or we didn't, and that was because and I'm the same way. It's all about the feel.
My buddy Lenny and I, we got this joke where it goes, in the beginning was the vibe. and the vibe was good.
Yeah, now we're trying to find it again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's true, man. Like, I really value and respect that is, I wonder if that's like why, like an engineer is because you're driving this train of thought that's pulling so many compartments, and you got to keep it on track and get it to its destination. And that's not an easy task to be able to like deliver something and bring it home like that. So I really respect that.
Yeah, it's got to be high pressure too when you're working with other people, and it's one thing to sit there and fiddle endlessly on your own thing and be frustrated, right? But when someone's trying to get a sound, you have to try to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, well, you definitely shouldn't fiddle on your own thing too long, because you could go blind, I think.
Yeah, I turn into a werewolf, I think.
Yeah. The creative process is such a mystery, man. You definitely need the left and the right sides of the brain to really, bring it home.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a practice like everything else, and it's something that you have to have a lot of compassion and time. I think that's what separates a lot of the wheat from the chaff, is just those who just put in the time and are willing to be disciplined and consistent. It's amazing what you can do despite talent or all these other things. It's just really about sticking with things, and you can make a lot of amazing things if you just do a little bit at a time.
A little bit every day goes a long way. And I think the thing that really, can be, when you talk about earlier about your edge, like when you hear people criticize a film or a book or an album or a song, and they don't really make those things, and and they don't really know like what it takes to make those things. Like, you want to please your audience. You want to make stuff that's going to enhance the lives of your audience. So those opinions are important and they're valid, but sometimes they're just really hard to hear, because it's really easy to like react very knee-jerk way. Oh, I don't like that. It's like, it goes back to that, what we mentioned earlier about Patanjali, about likes and dislikes. And if there's something that you see that kind of makes you question your identity, maybe your cultural identity, or maybe your, some part of yourself that you like or don't like, but you're seeing some art and it's kind of like
shakes you out of your dream a little bit,
you're not going to like that, like
it's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. And a lot of like big artists who are like really provocative, and, they'll put out content and people will just, they will hate it to a degree that I'm like, wow, it's like, it's amazing. It can elicit that kind of response.
Yeah.
And so, art is really powerful because it can kind of really shake you to your core, and kind of, it can wake you up, or it can dull you and lull you back to sleep. So
I'm trying to do both. I'm trying to lull people into sleep in some form of wakefulness, like to offend them with beauty. I don't know.
That's awesome.
So this podcast, Nick, is called 10 Laws with These 4 Essence, because I'm kind of exploring in different people, which we've been doing, but sort of their own path and what their own laws are that perhaps they've developed in their life, their own set of stars that help keep their ship sailing straight. And I'm always curious if you have any practices or maxims or things you're like, hey, this is something I don't do anymore. Like, I don't smoke weed much anymore. That was a long time ago. I mean, that's an easy one. But some people have talked about things how they try not to do things, or the type of space they try to bring into their life, or an energy they try to cultivate, or a tea they drink every day.
Right.
You have anything like that you've sort of just discovered along the way for yourself? It's very personal.
Yeah, there's a type of tea I drink. It's called cappuccino. No.
Yeah, actually, I we had some good coffee drinks when we were working.
I do. I love coffee. I love tea. I love Tulsi tea, actually, which is holy basil.
You ever do guayusa?
Yeah, I do love that too. I think the thing for me, I need a cave. And it's really important. I joke to my wife that she married a caveman, because, I got my man cave, and I think I don't know if it's like I don't know what it is, but it's something about going into a dark room with all my stuff in it, and I could turn my music up loud and just be in my own space. Maybe it goes back to when I was a little kid and my parents were getting divorced, and I just put my headphones on and kind of went into my own zone to like kind of, escape all the pain that was going on in the home. But there's something that kind of lends itself to, escaping the pain of the world in my room, and then bringing forth the things that are inside me that are transcendent of that pain, and really turning that into music and into art, into like whether it's drawing or editing designs or songs. I think it's just going into that it's actually a physical space, and that physical space kind of mirrors that internal cave of being able to escape the matrix, so to speak, and bring out what is truly authentic to my being, my heart, my soul, and then having the courage to share that, because it's not always easy to share your soul with the world. It takes a real sort of warrior, courageous spirit to be able to do that, because the world is a beautiful place, but as we know, it's not always the most kind place. And so it's being innocent, having a space where I can get into my own innocence and my own childlike sort of energy, and then being an adult where I can go out and actually work it and tour it and deliver it and share it. It's kind of finding that balance. So I just need, I need a man cave and a big ass stage.
Yeah, I definitely can see how that, I mean, just from knowing you, I can see how like having physical recluse space, and also you do that with your mind too a bit. I know it's helpful for you to kind of go in and just sort of like, it's a way of recharging.
Yeah.
And that's also where a lot of your personal creative space seems to come from, is sort of this very small, intimate, personal process. Yeah. And then it's sort of like letting it come out from there, or it seems like an energy that you need to cultivate.
That's how I oil the dream machine.
That's how you work on the outside. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Do you have anything else? Any other little tippies?
Collaborate with inspiring people like yourself and other people who have a shared desire to really create beauty in the world and make something that's, genuine, authentic, and reading. I'm a huge comic book nerd. I read thousands and thousands of comic books, which, I think in the old days, people used to kind of look down on comic books. But I think now that the nerds reign supreme, I think that people have a deeper understanding that like graphic novels and comic books are actually brilliant, sophisticated ways to communicate ideas and stories. And so I love reading. I love just like soaking and saturating my mind in stories, comic books, movies. I love video games. I love color. I love animation. And I just genuinely am a huge, huge fan of human creativity, especially when it's used for a benign purpose, to benefit and uplift society. I just think that's so
celebrate
amazing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, cool, man.
And then of course I spend a lot of time with my wife, who's also an artist. So, we over the years, we've learned how to really gently criticize each other. Because she'll ask my advice and I'll ask her advice, and she actually gives me really, really good feedback. She's like, got to be honest, this song kind of stinks, like, or she'll be painting something. I'm like, sweetie, I really think you should try this other color as a background. And, at first it's like difficult. You don't want to hear anything from anyone,
right?
Like, leave me alone. I'm doing my thing. But then like when you listen and take it in, you're like, actually, you know what? She makes a really good point. And
having those trusted confidants for creative criticism, it's like, don't ask anybody.
Yeah, don't ask anybody, because not everybody.
Everyone's got an opinion, and it might not be that relevant, and it's gonna stick.
Yeah, it's right. That's right, man. It's funny how those things stick to your ribs, and you got to really work to polish them and get them off.
Do you find any danger from that, from even things like your social media existence, like a way that you have to be a little bit, have some armor up or manage how the energy of that?
Well, earlier you were saying like, what's your edge? And there's nothing that kind of irks me and rubs me the wrong way and pisses me off and makes me frustrated more than social media. Because I just find myself really judgmental, really critical. I look at how people are talking into their phones and I'm like, really? Like
it feeds that part of the brain, like on purpose.
Yeah, it's
as a way of getting our attention, It's like a low base thing.
It's the train wreck you can't look away from, and it's literally the definition of distraction. You're off track.
Yeah.
And so, but then at the same time, like you're saying, it's that double-edged sword, because I'll go onto Instagram and some people will post, just like, I follow a lot of muralists and graffiti writers and DJs, and some of the stuff that I see on there, it's like, wow, I would never see this any other way.
Sure.
And so it's a great window into your process. And I love that part of it. All the other ego personality stuff is just so much noise that it can be annoying.
Yeah, it's one of your 5-edged swords or razor blades.
Yeah, it's
Cool, man. Well, we can wrap this up. I know I got to get going, but I wanted to just ask you, like, what you're up to right now, where people can find you. You got your book. That's out everywhere, right?
Yeah, Spiritual Graffiti's out everywhere. And it's such a huge honor because I just got like a silver award for best memoir of 2017 from this Nautilus award, which was amazing. I wasn't expecting that. And
that's awesome.
And it was like, like Thich Nhat Hanh got that award, and these amazing luminaries who I look up to. And I was just kind of blown away. And when we got the email, we were in Sri Lanka, and I told Amanda, I said, "Sweetie, I got award." And she says, "What is it?" And I said, "It's the Nautilus silver medal." And she goes, "We're number 2. We're number 2. We're number 2.
I just like that it's a Nautilus, but
yeah, I love the Nautilus, man. And so, just sharing the book, and, there's an audio book that I recorded, which is pretty cool. And,
oh, you did? Cool.
Yeah. And
is that out?
It's out. It's on Audible. And
nice.
Actually, the crazy thing is when you and me were working on our record, Ritual Mystical, which people can also check out on like Spotify and iTunes. The book deal had just come in, so I was just starting the book process.
You were writing, and there was so much going on at that time, and you were like, every weekend you were flying and doing 2 different cities, and then we'd meet up like Monday, Thursday, Friday, and then you were supposed to write too.
I think I'm going to be a lot more focused on. I'm hoping we can do Ritual Mystical Part 2. That's what
will you call it?
We could call. Oh my gosh!
Lean back, release the fist. Yeah. I dig it. And you have mcyogi.com, right?
Yeah, MC
sort
Yoga.
of central portal.
Dates on there, and we're going to Panama this fall, and we'll be going back to Sri Lanka next year. So I love the retreats because it gives Amanda and I opportunities to really like drop in with people, and
it's FaceTime, man. It's like real.
It's real, and I just. The older I get, the more I really value and appreciate just real human connection.
It's all there is in a lot of ways, right? That's what it is all about. We're all dancing around that. Yeah.
Yeah,
cool,
that's
man.
The spark. Well, cool, man. It's always great to hang out with you, Trevor, man. I can't wait to get back in the studio with you.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to seeing the new digs, and thanks for talking.
Yeah, anytime, bro.
Well, there it is. Thank you to MC Yogi for joining us. Really had a good time having that conversation. The track you're hearing right now is a remix of the song Circle the Sun, which was from Ritual Mystical, and this remix was done by Keith Sweaty. And MC Yogi's been super kind. He's offering this as a free download for anyone who would like it as part of this podcast. So I've put that on the music page of eastforest.org. You go over eastforest.org, hit the music tab, and find your way to the Ritual Mystical album, and I will add this track to the list of songs there as, I don't know, a bonus track or something, and it'll be free if you'd like to download that particular track. Also, if you like this podcast, please don't forget to review it. It's really easy to do on your phone. You can just drag down there to the bottom, I think, of the iTunes stuff about the podcast and hit 5 stars. Type in a quick little review. Makes a big difference. Please do share it with your friends. Send us your notes. Send us your questions. Send us your comments. info@eastforest.org. And we'll read some of them on the air. So keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit, but if you do it with grace.